Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. 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 Gopi Janababa Girivara Hari. Jaya Gopi Janababa Girivara Hari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivara Hari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivara Hari. Yashoda Nandana Raja Janadandana. Yashoda Nandana Raja Janadandana. Yashoda Nandana Raja Janadandana. Yashoda Nandana Raja Janadandana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivara Hari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janadandana. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janadandana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Ate Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Gopinatha ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaura Prema. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guru. And the clock works. Okay. And yes, Bhagavatam is coming. So, Hare Krishna, everyone. It's very nice to see you all again. I feel a little bit like in a dream, because it's almost become unimaginable for me to see devotees. We've been living in some sort of enclosures, like seeing others only through computer screens, and to actually see real devotees, it's like, are you for real? Oh, very nice. Okay. Yeah, and it's so nice to see Radhadesh. It's thriving. Very encouraging. Om ajānatimirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshuram militam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Yadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yukta Paradhamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadeshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhya Evacha Patitam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This morning we're reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam. So, Canto 10, Chapter 28, text number 7, Krishna rescues Nanda Maharaj. Are we all okay with English language, more or less? We need any translation services? It's okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaganarottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasa Tato Jayamudiraye Nashta Preshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So verse number 7 we can chant together. Ajānatā māmakena. Ajānatā māmakena. mūḍhenākārya-vedinā. mūḍhenākārya-vedinā. ānīto tava pitā. ānīto tava pitā. tat bhavān kṣantum arhati. tat bhavān kṣantum arhati. ajānatā māmakena. mūḍhenākārya-vedinā. ānīto tava pitā. tat bhavān kṣantum arhati. Others?
Ajānatā māmakena.
Ajānatā māmakena.
mūḍhenākārya-vedinā.
mūḍhenākārya-vedinā.
ānīto tava pitā.
ānīto tava pitā.
bhavān kṣantum arhati.
bhavān kṣantum arhati.
Ajānatā māmakena.
Ajānatā māmakena.
mūḍhenākārya-vedinā.
mūḍhenākārya-vedinā.
ānīto tava pitā.
ānīto tava pitā.
bhavān kṣantum arhati.
bhavān kṣantum arhati. Ajānatā māmakena. mūḍhenākārya-vedinā. ānīto tava pitā. bhavān kṣantum arhati. Gents.
Ajānatā māmakena.
Ajānatā māmakena.
mūḍhenākārya-vedinā.
mūḍhenākārya-vedinā.
ānīto tava pitā.
ānīto tava pitā.
bhavān kṣantum arhati.
bhavān kṣantum arhati.
Ajānatā māmakena.
Ajānatā māmakena.
mūḍhenākārya-vedinā.
mūḍhenākārya-vedinā. does this mean? Ajānatā, by one who was ignorant. Māmakena, by my servants. Mūḍhena, foolish. Akārya-vedinā, not knowing his proper duty. Ānīto, was brought. Ayam, this person. Tava, your pitā, father. Tat, that. Bhavān, your good self. Kṣantum arhati, should please forgive. Translation and purport by the followers of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation, your father who is sitting here was brought to me by a foolish, ignorant servant of mine who did not understand his proper duty. Therefore, please forgive us. This is spoken by the Devata Varuna to Lord Krishna. He's saying, please forgive me. Please forgive us. Please forgive my servant. Please forgive me. Purport. The word ayam, this one here, clearly indicates that Krishna's father, Nanda Maharaj, was present as Varuna was speaking. In fact, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states that Varuna had seated Sri Nanda on a jeweled throne and had personally worshipped him out of respect. Technically, Nanda Maharaj was correct in entering the water just before sunrise. The following explanation is given by Srila Jiva Goswami in his commentary on the first verse of this chapter. After an especially short Ekadashi, measuring only 18 hours, about 6 hours of the lunar day in which the fast had to be broken, namely the Dvadashi, had already expired before the dawn. Since at sunrise the proper time for breaking the fast would have passed, Nanda Maharaj decided to enter the water at an otherwise inauspicious time. Of course, Varuna's servant should have been aware of these technical details, which are meant for strict followers of the Vedic rituals. Above and beyond that, Nanda Maharaj was acting as the Supreme Lord's father and was therefore a most sacred person, beyond the touch of insignificant cosmic bureaucrats like the foolish servant of Varuna. So it seems there are cosmic bureaucrats, and some of them can be foolish. Yeah, sometimes we might feel that way when we see weather conditions do something strange. Cosmic bureaucrats are at work. Ajānatā māmakena mūḍhenākārya-vedinā ānīto tava pitā tat bhavān kṣantum arhati. Your father, who is sitting here, was brought to me by a foolish, ignorant servant of mine who did not understand his proper duty. Therefore, please forgive us. It's a please forgive us verse. We get this in some of Lord Krishna's pastimes. Lord Brahma has several "Please forgive me" verses. Chapter 14 of 10th canto is an entire chapter of "Please forgive me" verses. Beautiful verses, very deep. But here Varuna is, and of course Lord Indra also, "Please forgive me." They were both making some trouble for Krishna. We all know how they were doing so. The question arises regarding Indra and Lord Brahma. Perhaps you know the answer. Little quiz question. Which of the two made the greater offense to Lord Krishna? You know, Eka Chakragram? Lord Brahma. And why?
Because he separated the devotees from Krishna.
He attempted to separate the devotees from Krishna, yes. That's a serious problem. And so when, after he realizes his mistake and offers prayers, begging forgiveness, what does Krishna do?
He remains silent.
He remains silent, yes. Ooh, that was painful. In this case, Varuna is asking forgiveness to Lord Krishna for himself as well as his servant. Half the verse is saying that it was my servant, it was his mistake, and so one might imagine Varuna saying, well, that was my servant, it wasn't me. It wasn't my fault. However, there is an injunction, one of the commentators mentioned that the offense of a servant is also an offense of the master, which suggests why the master, or anyone in a position of authority or responsibility, is concerned about the behavior of those who are in their shelter. I didn't have time to look it up, but there's a very long letter from Srila Prabhupada to one gentleman in India who was complaining to Prabhupada about the behavior of Prabhupada's disciples. I don't know if he was giving any details, but especially in the early years in India, the devotees going to India, they were kind of a little wild sometimes, and so sometimes perhaps their behavior was a bit shocking to the Indians. So someone wrote a letter to Prabhupada saying, your disciples, you have to straighten them out. And Prabhupada wrote a very long letter expressing appreciation that he had pointed out these faults, and extensively Prabhupada defends his disciples. Extensively. He says, they may be at fault, but they're on the right path. They're doing the right, they're doing the right thing because they are following the system of bhakti. And so, it was basically saying, give them time. They're learning. I sometimes think of this. Some of you may have seen in Vrindavan these Ras Leela performances by children. How many have seen it? They're very, very charming. They're performed all by young boys. Even they'll be dressed up as gopis, and they'll be dancing as gopis. It's all boys, 100% boys doing all of the performance. And sometimes, not sometimes, usually, there'll be older boys and there'll be middle boys and younger. The oldest ones maybe are 16 years old, and then you get a whole range, and it sort of goes like this, and then you have the little 5 and 6-year-old boys. And when the dancing is happening on the stage, they have these very charming dances. The youngest boys are doing their best, and a lot of the time they have no clue. They don't know what they're doing, but they're kind of trying to follow. Sometimes everyone's spinning this way and they will spin that way, they're confused. But it's okay. It's okay. Nobody feels like, why are you putting these small boys on the stage? No, that's okay. They're learning. They're learning. The particular foolish servant, the māmakena mūḍhena, my fool, literally, who is ajānatā, who doesn't know what he's doing, is not named, and maybe that's good that he's not named. That would be a further embarrassment. But we might want to remember another case of foolish servants in the Bhagavatam, who are similarly thinking that they are justified in bringing someone for punishment. Who might that be?
Indra.
The Yamadutas, yes. Indra? I'm not knowing which case you're referring to.
When he sent some attacker clouds to destroy.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, that's there. But the more parallel case, I think, here would be the Yamadutas. As we all know, they feel it is their duty to take Ajamila, this sinful fellow, and to bring him to Yamaraj for punishment. Similarly, this servant of Varuna thinks that he has to presumably he has to bring none other than Nanda Maharaj to Varuna for punishment. Now, Varuna, why Varuna? We, of course, would assume because he is the Lord of the waters. But I would suggest there may be other reasons. And here I beg your indulgence while I read from the Rig Veda. We have a translation in recent years, quite scholarly translation of the Rig Veda has been done. And I came to find one of the Vedas one of the hymns of the Rig Veda in which Varuna appears. Varuna is also considered a lord of righteousness and the lord of order, and he is sometimes seen with a noose, a rope for punishing. So this, don't worry if some of this doesn't make sense. Rig Veda has lots of obscurities in it. This is an unusual hymn, according to the translators. It's one of 4 hymns in a series focusing on Varuna in the 7th mandala. This is 786, I believe. It's a discussion, or it's spoken especially by Vasishta, and Vasishta is asking Varuna for pardon. And what exactly he's done is not clear, but let's just see how this sounds. I think it's interesting also to hear a bit of Rig Veda, because we always say that we follow the Vedas, and if we are asked, okay, so what's in the Vedas, we kind of shrug our shoulders and say, I don't know. Yeah, we follow the Vedas. What's in the Vedas? I don't know. Okay, so... Insightful are the races of gods and mortals, through the greatness of him who propped apart the two wide world halves. He pushed forth the vault of heaven to be high and lofty, also the star that is the sun once again, and he spread out the earth. And together with my own self I speak this. When shall I be within Varuna? Might he take pleasure in my offering, becoming free of anger? When shall I, with good thoughts, look upon his mercy? I ask myself about this guilt, O Varuna. So now he's addressing Varuna. I ask myself about this guilt, O Varuna, wanting to see. I approach those who understand in order to inquire. Even the sage poets say the very same thing to me. Quote, Varuna now is angry with you. Unquote. Was the offense so great, Varuna, that you wish to smash a praise singer and companion? Vasishta is a poet, and so he says, I am a singer of praise. You want to smash me, and I'm your companion. You will declare this to me, O you hard to deceive, O you of independent will. With reverence I would swiftly make recompense to you to be freed of guilt. Release from us ancestral deceits and those that we ourselves have committed. O king, release Vasishta from his bond, like a cattle-stealing thief, like a calf. This was not one's own devising, nor was it deception, O Varuna, but rather liquor, frenzy, dice, thoughtlessness. So he's trying to say, I did something wrong, but I wasn't intentionally deceptive. It wasn't ill motivation. I drank too much. I drank too much, and I was gambling, and I got into a frenzy, and I wasn't thinking. So I'm sorry. The elder exists within the misdeed of the younger. Not even sleep wards off untruth. Like a servant, I will give satisfaction to the generous master. Freed from offense, I will give satisfaction to the ardent one. The civilizing God, that is Varuna, made those without understanding to understand. The better sage poet, that is Vasishta, speeds his clever patron, Varuna, to riches. This praise song is for you, Varuna, you who are of independent will. Let it be set within your heart. Let there be good fortune in peaceful settlement for us, and let there be good fortune in war for us. Do you protect us always with your blessings. So now, when somebody asks you, what's there in the Rig Veda, you can say, oh yes, we have, for example, this prayer, this hymn. So you see, that's a very interesting tone. Now the Bhagavatam, which is the understood, Nigama Kalpataro Galitam Palam Shukumukat Amrita Drava Samyutam, this is the fruit, the ripened fruit of the Vedic literature, Galitam Palam. And in this ripened fruit of Vedic literature, what do we see? We see the real position, so to say, of Varuna. He's put in the humble position. Oh, I've made a mistake. Vasishta was praying to Varuna, please forgive me. Now Varuna is praying to Krishna, please forgive me. And he's saying, ānītaḥ, ayam, tava pitā. This your father is ānītaḥ. He has been brought to me. And then I find it curious, after saying tava pitā, then he says tat bhavān kṣantum arhati. So tava is familiar form, your, and bhavān is formal, you. Both referring to the second person, but one is familiar and one is formal, and they're both in the same verse. So I don't know what to make of that, and as far as I know, the commentators don't mention it. We have, however, in the purport here, this rather detailed explanation about Ekadashi and Dvadashi, and this is something that astrologers can certainly tell you something about, and which I, not being an astrologer, can tell you nothing more than what's in the purport about. Hare Krishna. But what's perhaps interesting is that Nanda Maharaj is making a judgment of how to act. This, by the way, might also remind us of King Ambarish. He was in a bit of a quandary, had to do with his fasting for Ekadashi and wanting to break the Ekadashi, and how to break the Ekadashi at the right time, especially when you have a guest who's just showed up, and he just happens to be Durvasa Muni. And we all know Durvasa Muni has what we call a short fuse. You know this expression? A short fuse? You know this expression? Yeah, short fuse, like if you have a stick of dynamite and the fuse, you light the fuse. If it's a long fuse, you can light it, and you can have your lunch, your prasadam, and then you can leave. But if it's a short fuse, you light it, you have to run fast. In other words, he's quite impatient. And Ambarish Maharaj had this dilemma. He can't eat before his guest eats, but he has to eat before the time is up. But then again, if he does that, that'll be good for his vow, but it's not going to be good for his being a host of a superior, of a guest. What to do? So he takes the advice of the Brahmins, and they say, you can drink water. Water is both fasting and not fasting. This is also Vedic culture. You can do something and not do something at the same time, simultaneously. In this case, drinking water. So something like that is what Nanda Maharaj is doing here. Not exactly the same, but he understands, okay, it's generally not auspicious, but at this time, in this context, it's the best thing to do. And so he takes, as they say in India, he takes his sacred dip in the Yamuna, and he's immediately swept away. And as we'll see later in this chapter, coming before Varuna attracts Lord Krishna. Krishna is all attractive, but he becomes, so to say, attracted by the situation to appear before Varuna. And so this is also very much one of so many accounts in the Bhagavatam, what we might want to call a darshan story, a story about how the Lord appears before someone and how there is a transformation that takes place. In this case, there will be, in effect, two transformations, one of Varuna and one of the cowherd men of Vrindavan, as they come to appreciate just who Lord Krishna is. There is an interesting, I've noticed two, we might want to call them narrative symmetries that might be of interest to you. One in this chapter is that we have two cases of entering into water. And going into water is very commonly a situation where some sort of transformation takes place. And this is true in not just our Vedic literature, but worldwide, in mythologies of the world, going into water, coming out a changed being is very common, or some kind of transformation. So there's a few accounts in the Bhagavatam of entering into water and something happening there. And that's the case here in this chapter. There's another symmetry that I kind of noticed some weeks ago. I was going through the next 5 chapters, and the next 5 chapters are most celebrated. These are called the Rasa Panchadhyaya, sometimes Rasa Lila Panchadhyaya, the 5 chapters of the Rasa Lila. And I wondered, so what is it that happens just prior to the Rasa Panchadhyaya, and what happens after the Rasa Panchadhyaya? And guess what? It turns out that just before the Rasa Panchadhyaya, Krishna rescues Nanda Maharaj, and just after the Rasa Panchadhyaya, Krishna rescues Nanda Maharaj from another situation. He's getting swallowed up by a snake in chapter 34. So Krishna is rescuing his father, which may lead us to want to reflect on another subject, which is children rescuing their parents. And we have this theme I would say very deeply present in the tradition. We have it also enshrined in ritual, the idea that in particular the son, but broadly the children, in a sense, rescue their parents from hell. They're called putraka. They rescue the parents from from the place of hell. And how do they do that? By performing the Shraddha ceremony, by remembering the parents and offering proper honors and so on. And also by their behavior, they establish themselves as the sons and daughters of their parents. They honor them by their honorable behavior, and thus they are honored in the world, and thus their parents are honored. So that's a way in which society keeps continuity, if you like. So let's see, was there another specific point to be made here? No, simply again, of course, Lord Krishna is merciful, and he is going to be appealed, or he is being appealed to here by Varuna for that reason, and that's mentioned also by one of the commentators. I'd have to look again. Maybe it's Jiva Goswami who says that in effect Varuna is addressing Krishna and saying, "You are the ocean of mercy," or "You are an ocean of mercy, and I am an ocean of fault." The ocean of mercy is able to save the ocean of fault, so you kindly do so. And this is what he does. And so this is the business of the followers of Lord Krishna, that they, following as children of Krishna, as he is merciful, so the devotees are merciful. And that is the principle of our Krishna consciousness movement, such that we see Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur praying, Kabe jibe doya hoibe udoy, nija sukha buli sudina hridoy, bhakati vinod korya vinoy, Shri Agyatahal korya prachar. He says, Kabe, when jibe doya korya, when will I be meek and feel mercy for conditioned souls? Jiva doya. And the context of this feeling, he says, nija sukha buliya, forgetting my own happiness. So not that I'm first going to get what I'm thinking is going to make me happy, and then I'll be merciful to others. He says, no, I'm going to just forget about my happiness and be merciful to others. Kabe, when? So he's not saying, that's how I am. He's saying, when am I going to be like that? Kabe jive doya korya vinoy, nija sukha buli sudina hridoy. Feeling very, sometimes the word dina can mean wretched, feeling very small in the heart. Bhakati vinod korya vinoy, being vinaya, being meek and humble. Shri Agyatahal. Agnya means order. When am I going to take the order of the beautiful order, the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? When am I going to appreciate the beauty and power and glory of that order? Shri Agyatahal, Korya, Prachar, and preach. That's my question of longing, says Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So we may see some element of that feeling also in Varuna, as he is also feeling humbled and also honored, as we'll see in further verses. He feels so honored that Krishna has come. It's very difficult to have the darshan of Krishna. And in this case, Varuna didn't have to do anything except have a foolish servant. Just by having his qualification was to have a servant who is foolish. So we may want to say this is also the wonder of Vrindavan. All of this is happening where? It's happening in Sri Vrindavan Dham. And so we see the glories of Sri Vrindavan Dham being praised in the Vrindavan Mahimamrita by Prabodhananda Saraswati, to the extent he's saying, I wouldn't leave Vrindavan for anything, only a madman would leave Vrindavan, and so on. This praise of Vrindavan, we may say, is also indirectly suggested here. Varuna, who's usually associated with the ocean, seems that he has come upstream. He's now present in the Yamuna. And here in the Yamuna, he is getting the blessings of Lord Krishna, not by any qualification, we may say, of Varuna, any qualification of his own, but simply by a fluke of circumstance that his servant is doing something he shouldn't do. So we may also reflect on that. We often become a little preoccupied with what is right, what is wrong, doing it just, we want to make sure we don't make mistakes. Some devotees are very concerned to eat some grains during the Ekadashi Parana, the period of time that's mentioned in the Dvadashi, when one breaks the fast. They become very concerned about that, even though they haven't actually been doing the full Ekadashi fast. It seems that Nanda Maharaj, and that's interesting also, why would Nanda Maharaj feel that he has to fast on Ekadashi? After all, he's Krishna's father. But he is feeling, he wants to be a good, perhaps he wants to be a good example for his son. He's a religious person. He's fasting completely, and therefore he's concerned about breaking that fast. If you're fasting completely on Ekadashi, then it may be of concern when is the Ekadashi Parana. Otherwise, again, I'm not an astrologer, but my understanding is not really critical. Hare Krishna, Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. So I've just thrown out a few odds and ends of reflections on the verse related. But if you have any further reflections, comments, or questions? Yes, Shyamasundar, Shyamananda.
I was thinking, Maharaj, please forgive me, elements. I thought we were going to take it one step further. We said Shishta approached Varuna, please forgive me. Varuna is here approaching Krishna. Krishna, we know, also has his please forgive me approaches on a number of times. And I was thinking, even again with more symmetry to this, when in the Jai and Vijay pastime, when Krishna comes out, he goes to the four Kumaras, please forgive, they're my servants, but I'm actually responsible, so please forgive me. Don't forgive them, forgive me, because they're my, yes. I'm responsible for their behavior.
Oh yes, thank you, very good.
So, and then of course with the gopis as well, he also, please forgive me too.
He's always in trouble with the
gopis.
Yes.
Lord, I thank you very much for your nice lecture. You put a lot of questions in my mind. I have one doubt and also one disagreement in my mind about who was more offensive, Indra or Brahma. And I cannot agree with that, but maybe you can overcome my doubt, because there's a story about Solomon and these two ladies who had 2 children. You know probably the story.
Biblical story.
Yeah.
Oh.
And one child was born dead, and the mother who had the dead child, she swapped it or swapped it.
Switched, yeah.
Yeah, and she took the living child and put the dead child by the other mother.
Oh.
So this mother was very suffering because she knew what was done. So they went both to King Solomon.
Oh yeah, I know this story.
Yeah.
He says, why don't you...
So, yeah,
just
so
cut it in
then,
half?
if you don't agree, I will cut the child. Yeah. So then you have both half. So, but then the real mother said, because she chose the living above the separation.
And then Solomon understands she's the real
She's
mother.
the real mother.
Right.
So in that sense, in my mind, it's like King Indra. He wanted to kill all the residents of Vrindavan.
Ah.
And Brahma, he separated them.
Yeah.
So I think every person, like, say, okay, if I have to choose me or my child or separation.
Okay. All I can say is you can bring your protest to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur.
You see, because I hear the story a few times and my mind says, I cannot understand how Indra, who was a killer at that moment, can be less offensive than Brahma, who just separate him as a test. Okay, but I will not argue with Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. But I want to understand, but okay.
Yeah. Well, it's a good point you're making, that, and it's an interesting comparison you make as well, which I wouldn't have thought of. That, I can only say, let's ask Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He's a very clever, commentator, Acharya, and he probably has a good answer, but I wouldn't know what it is myself.
So we can pray for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything? Okay. Oh, yes.
If I can.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your class. And usually, if I can I don't like to give a comment, but I can repeat what I heard on this topic which we are having, whose offense is bigger, Brahma's or Indra's. Because exactly that point, Purnatattva Prabhu is, for many of us, how we can take it that Brahma's offense is bigger, because Indra wanted to kill. And I asked Burijan Prabhu, from who I heard the lecture, he said, I cannot quote. He couldn't quote on Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur about that point, but he said that's the common standard in Vrindavan. Everyone sees that Brahma's offense is bigger. Then I asked Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, Radhanath Maharaj's disciple, the one who knows everything. And he has so many perspectives. And he said it's very difficult to apply and understand commentaries of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on a broader, universal scale. Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan, he said, is an amazing one, but Srila Vishwanath is always difficult, and you cannot convince others about Krishna Tattva or dealings amongst Rajvasis without being a devotee. So that's the distinction I liked, and I think I profited personally from that. And sorry for my comment, usually I don't like it.
The plot thickens.
Thank you, Maharaj, for your lecture. Krishna. Maharaj, in one of the previous verses was mentioned that the servant was referred as demon-like. So if you could maybe explain why that word is actually used.
Demon-like, in the sense he's not recognizing. First, he's not recognizing who is Nanda Maharaj. He is none other than the father or foster father or real father of Krishna in Krishna Lila. And to not recognize and acknowledge this, one might want to say he's acting like you know, there are so many demons that Kamsa sends to try to kill Krishna. And this could be seen as a similar case. He's causing trouble to one of the residents, actually to all the residents, because they're disturbed when Nanda Maharaj disappears. Everyone is disturbed. Excuse me. Where is our Nanda Maharaj? And so he's a troublemaker. Yeah, that's all I can say. I mean, demon, okay, there's different levels, we might want to say, of demons. This one is, I think the emphasis is on his ignorance. He's just foolish, mūḍha. Yeah. So he's not a demon, he's demon-like. Okay, so, yes. Whoops. Oh, there's a question online. Oh. Back to the virtual world.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for your enlightening class. Question about helping others. Sometimes I hear the analogy of the butterfly struggling out of the cocoon and not helping it. Otherwise, there is no strength. How would you see this analogy in how devotees try to help others?
The butterfly in the cocoon,
Yeah.
and helping. I'm not sure I understand the analogy.
Yeah, there is a story of one devotee who was trying to help a cocoon to come out of the trying to help the butterfly come out of the cocoon.
Uh-huh.
And then first there was one that he saw, it just looked, he watched it, and then the butterfly came and he flew away. And then there's another cocoon which was also struggling to come out, and then he decided to help it.
Uh-huh.
And then the butterfly was just lying there without ability to fly.
Oh.
So then he said it's because he didn't struggle. So he came to the conclusion that actually his help was not really helping him to become strong. So then the question is how it is in relation to helping devotees. If this is better to help them or to help them to help themselves in this kind of...
It's good to help devotees to help themselves, definitely. It's good to help everyone to help themselves. I guess that's a general principle. If we are helping someone in such a way that they become, depending on our help permanently or something like that, that could be a problem. I think it's another analogy is parents raising children. Parents raising children are helping the children to help themselves, isn't it? So similarly, and that means it takes some skill to know when and how to help someone, and when to sort of hold back and have them do it themselves. Sometimes the parent helps the child learn to ride a bicycle by sort of accompanying and holding the bicycle, and at some time the parent has a sense, okay, now he's ready, and he gives him a push, and the child is riding on his own, and then he falls over, but that's okay because he got the idea that it's possible to ride on your own, so he can do it. That's yes. I think we'll...
I'm just wondering, Guru Maharaj, about Varuna. Was he pacified after these prayers of Vasishta? Because after all, that kind of was an arrangement for him to get the darshan of Krishna. So I was wondering if that pacified him, all in all.
I'd have to look at the next verse, the next hymns in the Rig Veda, although typically the hymns of the Rig Veda are kind of stand alone. They don't have a sort of continuity to them. And there are a lot of references in the Rig Veda to something that's happened, and there's very little, if any, detail given. So the story of Indra killing Vritra is mentioned several times in the Rig Veda, but you get hardly any detail. And so we get the detail in the Bhagavatam. So I don't know if I can give an answer for that, what happens to Varuna. Yeah. So we can end there, but I want to mention my suggestion that I've been making for devotees in temples, that it's very good if devotees, not just the devotee who will be giving the lecture, the class, the Bhagavatam class, but that everyone sometime between, for example, now and tomorrow's class, that you read the verse or verses and purport or purports in advance. You spend the 2 minutes or the 3 minutes or the 5 minutes to read in advance those verses. And I call this priming the pump. If you have a pump that hasn't, a water pump, hand pump that hasn't been used for a while, you need to pour water into it and then it'll work. Similarly, we can all have our minds sort of put in place in advance, and that can help to enrich the Bhagavatam class. So I've been suggesting to devotees in different temples, make a 7-day experiment and see if this works. That you read the verse and the purport, or verses and purports. It's nice to do just before the class, then you're freshly thinking, and then some question or issue may come to your mind like that, and then you can be fully awake during the class. Okay, thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Premanande.